Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Check Me Out. And it is a nice sunny day out there today, so worth chatting to someone that loves the outdoors today. And we have the lovely brand Off Piste with Jade. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, Laura. Good to be here.
Cool. All right, so let's start right from the top. You want to tell us a little bit about Off Piste and where you started and the vision that you had for the brand?
Yeah, so we kicked off in earnest into market in November 21. And it really came about through a big passion of mine and my partner's, which is around impact and sustainable journeys. We'd just come back from offshore, living offshore for a good 10, 20 years, and looked at the whole impact space in New Zealand and how do you move the dial on climate change. And pretty quickly, when you look at the data, it ends up at cattle
Hmm.
and the meat and dairy industries as being the key, emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in New Zealand. So that pretty much summed it up for us. That's where we need to put our efforts, and we can either reduce the impacts of the meat or we just get rid of it completely. So we went for the second option, and that was inspiration behind the brand. So we've kicked off Piste Provisions, which is manufacturing meat analog product, which in layman's terms is imitation meats or plant-based meats. And we do ambient product. So we're not the chiller, we're not the freezer, we're only shelf-stable product. So think of things like jerky, biltong, crackling, any meat product that sits in grocery is where we target. So that's been the journey since November into market, a bit over a year and a half now, and loving it.
Awesome. And what was it like to create that product? Because I think a lot of people would go, how does one go from, say, a jerky to getting that same kind of, flavor and taste and all that? Did you have to go through quite a lot of trials to get to the product that you wanted to?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we ended up at about 136 iterations before we got one that was ready for market. And each of those iterations can take anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks to move on to the next iteration. So yeah, it was a pretty laborious process. That being said, it was an awesome journey. I'm from a food background, from an agricultural background. I wasn't from a food tech background. And so I've really enjoyed digging into the technology piece. We teamed up with Massey University through their food pilot program down in Palmy North here in New Zealand. And we effectively built out those prototypes over about 6 months to get it to that, kind of prototype phase. And then we moved to the food bowl here in Auckland. And it took another 6 months to get it ready for market, going from a prototype to something that's actually, MVP for market launch.
Yeah.
So about a year's worth of science went into that first SKU. But yeah, being surrounded by super smart food technologists, scientists, lecturers, hugely stimulating, even though incredibly challenging.
Yeah, and you talked about the Food Starter, the program in Palmerston North, which I have actually had a couple of other clients go through that. And what was like getting into that? Because I think there's probably some people out there like yourself who have these amazing ideas and products that basically doesn't exist right now. So what was it like kind of approaching that and going, hey, can you help us make this product?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of those models, the likes of Food Pilot. And we did look around New Zealand for who the best partner was. What we really enjoyed about the Food Pilot and NZ Fin in general, so that's New Zealand Food Innovation Network, is it's really around applied science, not so much research or think tanks or policy. It's really much about how do you take an idea and turn it into something tangible.
Yeah.
So that was where we ended up with them. And yeah, I mean, that's their whole mandate, is to take an idea and can we get it to market, and not just to market, but also something that's going to wow the consumer, something that's economically viable in terms of costings and production viability. And then obviously, how do you package that in a way that presents well and entices consumers to trial?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a lot of trial and error, absolutely. But I think it's about being really clear about where you're trying to head and not veering off course too much when you hear people saying it can't be done, or that's, those expectations are, impractical or unrealistic, and just really being clear about, what you're willing to trade off and what you're not willing to trade off on.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. What was it like getting that first big order through, the first time you kind of like, well, okay, this is real and happening now? Was it was it overwhelming or scary in any way, or?
Oh, it's a bit of a blur, to be honest. When you go to market, you just lack of sleep, you're running on fumes. No matter how well you prepare, there's always last minute things to be done. You only prepare so much. And our biggest curveball was that we had to launch during lockdown with COVID lockdowns. So very difficult to produce. We were limited to 2 people on site at the plant. We originally had about 6 planned. So there's a lot of heavy lifting. And then, getting in touch with retailers is quite challenging because they were just looking at survival mode, getting toilet paper and bread to the shelf. So no, it was a big blur, but definitely a sense of relief, I think, more than anything, when you get that first, unit sent off on the shelf. The retailer sent it back. We were fortunately, actually, Gulf Foods and Waikiki were the first guys to take us on board, going local, and then we got into Farrows, and then from Farrows you start having bigger conversations with the likes of Foodstuffs and Woolworths. So yeah, but awesome feeling, without a doubt.
Oh, cool. Also, and what are some of the earlier challenges that you faced? Obviously, we've spoken about COVID and launching into a market where people, like you say, are just wanting to get bread and toilet paper onto the shelves. But was there anything else in particular, I guess, around the brand or getting people to understand what the product was? Because if it's a first thing to market, I think there's, usually a bit of education needed, or were people pretty sure on, what you were offering?
No, I think it's the short answer to that one. We definitely chose a category that just conventionally, so if you look at conventional beef jerky or biltong, it's not even, you wouldn't claim it's a very large category in New Zealand. It's not part of our usual snacking diet. When you compare it to things like crisps, chocolate, even powdered, protein bars. So we were coming into a category that had a pretty low profile. And then we're obviously doing an alternative version of that. So not only were you trying to talk about a category that wasn't really top of mind, you're then trying to talk to a subcategory of a category. So that was probably the biggest challenge for us. But we also saw there's an opportunity, because people didn't have expectations about probably what jerky tastes like anyway in New Zealand. Where now that we're exporting into this place like America and Australia, where jerky is a bigger part of their diet, you've got those conversations around expectation. So it kind of worked, for us and against us. But irrespective, it was pretty cool getting to set, hey, this is what we think it should be like, and being the first to market. And effectively we were, at least mainstream. It allowed us to really set the bar, whether it was with price, branding, experience, which was, that's the great thing about playing in a new space.
Yeah, cool. And you were just talking about exporting. What's that been like? Because obviously you've only been going since 2021 and we're 2023, and a lot of people would, I think, look at New Zealand first in a while, and then you guys have gone, hey, let's just try the world. So how's that been?
Yeah, it's been awesome. We're still very early in that journey. We only launched into Australia in December. We launched into America in a couple of weeks. Obviously, there's a lot of work that goes in before that, including consumer trials and all the paperwork. But I think where we've ended up right now is we always set off to be a global brand. It was never our ambition to be a New Zealand-centric brand. And when we looked at that global strategy from day one, we felt the best approach was to launch in New Zealand, because it gave us a chance to validate the product, the brand, the price, the packaging, all those touch points that we needed to nail in a forgiving market. And New Zealand's quite forgiving because it wasn't such expectation around jerky in New Zealand. Also, the costs in New Zealand are relatively cheap when you make mistakes. If we ship a product to, I don't know, Farrows, they send it back, well, there's a couple $100 in a freight cost. Where if you send it to America and you get it wrong, there's probably $3,000-4,000 in a freight cost that's lost. So we felt that it was a safer way to do it. Also, what we found when looking at global markets, one of the first questions I'll ask you when you knock on a door is how are you going back in your home market? Are you killing it there? Are you smashing it there? And that's often a prerequisite for picking up these conversations. So that's kind of why we did it that way. In terms of the export piece, I think the most challenging part right now has been just around labeling and FDA and all those government regulations, which you're more than familiar with.
100%, very, very much warm. For anyone that's listening and that is looking to get into the US, there is all sorts of things like the size of the font on the nutritional information table. There's a whole lot more regulations. If you think New Zealand and Australia is bad, just wait till you go into the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just gone on that journey. Once again, the food bowl's been awesome. They have got a pretty validated contact list. So we've gone through their network and we've been given a really cool partner to get us through that process. And actually our shipment turned up a week today and it went through customs, no problem. So it's always a big moment. You kind of hold your breath. Are you getting stopped at customs? So awesome to get that first shipment through. And we've done our groundwork. That's definitely been the biggest challenge outside of just trying to work out what that product to market is. And we've actually changed our product that we're launching into the States and what we launched in New Zealand based on consumer research with American consumers. So trying to optimize the offering for different regions.
Awesome. And with when you first started the brand, did you have any sort of, like you mentioned that you didn't want, from the start, you were like, this is going to be a global thing. It's not just going to be a New Zealand-centric brand. When you look at the brand of whereabouts it is now in such a short space of time, because a couple of years in FMCG is not a long time, but were there any things that you can look back now and go, oh shit, actually we've done really well on that, or like any kind of goals that you had in the beginning that you can go, oh, we've already ticked that off?
Oh, for sure. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So we had a really clear plan and we've got clear milestones and clear objectives and we track against that as we progress. So it's been pretty easy for us to track how have we gone in comparison to our planning from day one. It's never a straight line. It goes in a pretty wonky up and down, at times going backwards. But generally in terms of our key metrics, we're on track with where we expected to be with export. But that being said, until we start getting launched in America, that's going to be the real test, I think. Australia is a bit of a lower stakes game for us. We haven't put quite as much into the Australian market. We've taken a different approach. We would de-risk Australia a lot more. But for the States, that's the world's largest jerky market, and we want to be world class. So we said, hey, let's not shirk the challenge. And so just go in there and let's see where we're at. And it's like going to the Olympics, right? Like you've got your PB back home, but until you get on that world stage, you don't really know where you're at. So we're really excited for that kind of 13-week launch period is what we track to see how we've gone. And I think at the end of that 13 weeks, we'll finally have a chance to see where we are sitting internationally.
Awesome. Oh, that's so great. And what do you think makes a good, now that you've had a couple of years in this space, what are your thoughts on what makes a good food brand?
Good food brand.
And retail food, in the FMCG space.
Sure. I think there's different strategies. And, you've got people that lead with cheap product and a pretty average product. Others that come in at a high price with a really exceptional product. I think it does come back to your objectives. Are you trying to scale fast? Are you trying to make profit from day one? Are you trying to attract a niche? Are you trying to get mainstream buy-in? So I think it's hard for me to answer what a good product is, because good to me is it going to achieve your objectives? But let's say your objective is to get traction in the market, become kind of one or two in your space, which generally you have to sit at to be viable. I would personally say you can never go wrong. If you have an amazing product, you can never go wrong. So if you're product-led, innovation-led, and you're focused on the consumer, you may not get it right, but I don't believe you get it wrong. And so definitely to me, that's the biggest kind of safety net, is always focusing on product and ensuring that you've got an amazing experience. And it's got to be the whole experience. It's not just the chew or the taste. It's the whole opening the packet, how it presents, how it looks, all those things. So that kind of custom
packaging as well, the packaging,
of course,
and stuff like that.
they don't pick it up unless it looks good on the shelf. And no, packaging is a huge part of our piece, and we can talk about that in a moment. But in terms of a good product, there's one thing I talk to the team about, and it's better over cheaper, and I'll always stick to that. So if we're looking to sacrifice quality over costings, generally we won't do it unless we're completely priced out of the market, and then we have to tone it back a bit. But yeah, that's kind of the guideline for us, and that's where food technology comes in for us, Laura.
Yeah.
And we've always said we're not a food manufacturing company, we're a food technology company.
Yeah.
And that means innovation at every stage of every day. And it's a different mindset. And so innovation is what we lead with, and that hopefully results in a better product.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I heard a very interesting comment actually yesterday from one of the guys from PALS. And he said, what's become the most important thing to them is what they say no to rather than what they say yes to. Which I'm starting to realize a lot of people like yourself, you know what's important in the brand and what you compromise and what you don't compromise is really important to scaling, especially if you're looking to scale globally. There might be things that you come across that you go, okay, no, that's just not for us because it just doesn't fit with our brand and our morals. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the best example we had of that, Laura, was when you're doing plant-based meats, a big part of it's texture, right? And trying to get that mouthfeel along with the binding properties that come with proteins. And we could have got to market probably 6 months earlier and probably half the cost if we'd used gluten. We from the outset said we wanted a clean label, and part of a clean label for us was gluten-free. Yeah. And taking that off the table when we're looking at formulation was a massive point of discussion with us and Massey and the inventors and everybody. And we held our ground on that. And what happened is we pushed the project out, but we've ended up with I'd say a superior product, not just in terms of being gluten-free, but actually in terms of the mouth experience, because gluten also has downsides in the mouth. So yeah, I think that was for us a big learning curve, one that I'm glad we held our course.
Yeah, and that comes down into talking about timing, I think, as well, is that a lot of people will come into starting an innovative product or a product brand in general and have a time and go, yes, okay, there's a category meeting in 6 months and I want to make that. And most people, will not meet that. And that's okay, because it's really about presenting your best product. And if that takes an extra 6 months, then so be it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And so packaging, that's my favorite subject of all, of course.
Yep.
Let's talk branding and packaging. And can you tell us a little bit about the brand from a design perspective and the packaging that you chose?
Oh, for sure. And you can see back there, that was our first iteration. It's changed slightly since that. But the general vibe is still the same. Yeah, the packaging piece, I'm also from a marketing background. I enjoyed that part of and having a B2C brand, packaging becomes hugely important. And how do we choose it? I think the first thing was being clear about what is the impression we're trying to leave? Irrespective of the design, the colors, the format, what is the impression? What's that? If they're going to take away one thing, a consumer, when they look at a pack, what is it going to be left with them? And so we went through that journey, and for us, we wanted to be left with the sense that this is a really clean product, right? And so the design had to be clean as kind of a first stepping stone. But then we looked at clean products, and we also found a lot of Me Too designs out there that I find really boring. They're clean and they're just following the same fonts, the same formats. It's kind of like a cookie cutter model out there right now, and you go on Instagram, you can kind of see it. And you could literally change the brand name on any of those packs and you would not know who they were. And so that to me was also a red flag, saying, hey, we've got to be clean, but we're also got to be really unique and what's going to stick in people's minds. I think the second part of it, we're looking at who are we trying to talk to in terms of the audience. And you've got to be really clear about who your target audience is. You can't design a packet, or you shouldn't design a packet, in my opinion, that's trying to talk to everybody. So we knew that by going with something that talked really strongly to our target market, it was also going to be quite polarizing for other people. And so when we chose animals on our product, even though we're a plant-based product, yeah, that was a massive design decision we took. And we copped a lot of flack for it from certain quarters. But what we found is most of those, the flack we copped wasn't from our target market. So that was, also interesting. I think the thing we chose about the illustration of having animals in the pack of a plant-based product was that whilst it's fine to put an animal on a meat product and celebrate effectively the killing of that animal, it wasn't okay to celebrate an animal that was effectively spared by celebrating what we're trying to do. So we kind of pushed back on that. We're saying, well, we've just got a different reason why we're celebrating an animal. And also it's an imitation of an animal. It's not a photo. It was an artist impression. And we're trying to give an impression of what we think plant-based meat is, using plant-based ingredients. So that was kind of our thinking there. I think the other things that came into it, Laura, was choosing our style. And I looked at one of the most exciting packaging spaces I've seen in the last, probably 10 years has been the craft beer space. Yeah. And they've really taken a lion's share out of mainstream beer just through packaging, and obviously great beer. But the packaging has been a huge part of that, and really eye-catching and creative and all the things that craft beer looks to, project. But what I did find over the years is it's got very noisy. And now you walk up to any craft beer display and it's really hard again to choose. You could change a logo from each can and you wouldn't really know whose it is. And there are very few brands that have managed to keep their brand identity in that noise. And so we have decided to go with a style that we won't change, which for us is offset. It's vintage, it's offset screen printing, right? And that's a feel that we'll have through all of our designs. So we'll get crazy with the designs and colors and whatever, especially in our collaborations with other brands, but we'll hold that one element. And that puts a thread through the brand, rather than we find some of the other brands jump around being creative, but there's no kind of continuity between those collaborations or those illustrations. So that's something which we've settled on, which gives us that continuity. And a host of other things. And probably the last piece around the packaging, it's one thing to look at a screen and get really excited about mock-ups and say that looks awesome. But until you actually walk into the supermarket, stick that mock-up on a shelf beside your competitors amongst the noise of grocery. Until you do that step, you don't actually know how effective your packaging is, because it may be the same color of everybody else. It may be noisier or not stand out. So how are you standing out from your competitors on shelf? And so we had various options and we put them on shelf, literally walked in the supermarket, cut them out, took a photo on, in the supermarket, and we started to see what it would look like. And it became pretty clear that for us, that canvas pack was going to stand out a lot more than any bright color or noisy design, because that's what everybody else is doing. And you just kind of got lost in the crowd.
Yeah, oh, that's so, so true. And I'm so glad that there are people out there, thank you, who think to do that kind of a thing, because it is one of the things, particularly in my process, and I'm not in any way, an advertisement for me at all, but is to actually just to go and stand in the store where the target store is and actually look what's missing, what's there too much of already, and what if something is missing, is it a good thing or a bad thing? And then I also encourage people, just go and take your packs into store, get sample packs, because the other big thing that a lot of people don't do these days is actually make time for sample packs. And they think, no, we've got to get it out, we've got to get it into people. And I said, no, you've really got to go get your sample packs made, take it into store and actually go and have a look at it, because it is the first time really that you get to see that. Otherwise it's too late.
Yeah, totally. And it's a tough one because, I believe, especially as a startup, when you don't have a lot of funds to support a launch or a product on shelf, we can't be affording to have billboards or, every store have an in-store tasting promotion or giveaways. We just don't have that budget. So your packaging has to really earn its keep, and it's really got to work hard to get that sell through. And we've got to remember, often we get caught up, I think, as entrepreneurs, you're trying to get your product onto the shelf of, say, a New World or a Pack and Save, and it's such a great moment when you do it, and you got to celebrate that. But that's not the job. We're trying to get it through the till of New World and Pack and Save. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to get on the shelf. And so we've got to be really clear of what's called a rate of sale, how many units are going through the till per week, per store, per unit. And that's a really key metric. And so packaging has to be driving that metric and basically working really hard. And there's nobody else around. It's just that pack sitting on the shelf. Is that packet talking to the consumer, talking to target market? Are those call outs there? Are those claims there? Is the design there? All those things. Yeah. And so we do put a lot of effort and probably go a little bit slow to get the design right.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you can't be a perfectionist, because you can play with the design. I'm sure, Laura, as a designer, you can play the design for hours and still not be happy with it. And there comes a point where it's got to be kind of done, not perfect. And you can change designs, and we'll change our design probably at year 2, we're going to have a re-look at our design, and based on 2 years of feedback, so you can't be too much perfectionist. You can change it, but get the key things right, and you should be in good nick.
Awesome. Yeah. And you've only got a couple of seconds, and like you're talking about billboards and that, excuse me, and effectively your packaging becomes your billboard when you've got somebody in a supermarket who's tired, who's just had a long day at work, who's got a list and things like that. And maybe there's somebody that's on holiday and they've stopped to get some snacks or something like that. So you've got 2 to 3 seconds to grab that person's attention. So that is your billboard. Yeah.
I think another insight we had around grocery, which comes back to pack design. Whilst you may be getting interest in the store, you need to know which part of the store it's going to be displayed. Because you take a product, we've got 2 obvious places. One's beside beef jerky and the other's down the plant-based aisle or the health aisle, right? And depending on where they decide to put us, we're talking to very 2 different people. In the jerky aisle, we're talking to people we're trying to convert, what we call meat reducers, to come, hey, let's try plant-based. If in the plant aisle, we're talking to typically vegans or plant-based people who are just looking for vegan options or plant-based options. And so we got word that we're going to be put beside jerky in the meat aisle. So we had to talk to meat eaters effectively. Was part of our decision. And that's why we also went for animals, because without that animal on it, because everybody else had horns and bulls and whatever, we thought we'd just get looked over. So there's another reason we decided to put an animal in the pack. Where if we were going to be put in the plant aisle, chances are we wouldn't have gone for that design. So I think that's another insight you've got to have with category manager to allow you to make those decisions.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Wow, that's great, and we've covered a lot of stuff, and I'm glad we talked a lot about packaging. Yeah, cool. Is there any kind of advice that you'd like to give to newcomers, to emerging brands coming into the space, particularly people around innovative products?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, and I think it's not my first rodeo. Launched quite a few products. It is my first FMCG venture, so that's been a really sharp learning curve. Again, this is my experience, and everyone had their own experience, but a couple of things that definitely have stuck with me, kind of 3 years since we started the project. One is definitely don't underestimate how expensive it is to get a product to market and to keep it there. And when you're doing those budgets, it's so important to do it as early as possible. If you're not good with numbers, don't worry, bring somebody in who is, and ideally somebody who has experience at FMCG numbers, not just business numbers, because that expertise in those numbers can save you literally months, if not years of pain. If you discover a year or 2 in that you can't actually stay there, either the margins don't work, maybe the cash flows burns too much to get market share, the cost of investment on innovation is maybe too much. So I think crunch your numbers as soon as possible and keep crunching the numbers. I know it's pretty painful, and as creatives and innovators, you just want to get stuck into the science and the design and the taste tests and all that, and I get that, but that's a bit delusional if you're not looking at the numbers, because at the end of the day, you're not running a social enterprise or a not-for-profit. I imagine most people are running a for-profit business, and maybe a social enterprise, but you've got to pay the bills. So I'd really encourage that. I mean, in my experience and talking to other entrepreneurs, to get to mainstream FMCG in New Zealand, and I'm talking, let's say, being ranged by probably 100 stores across New World, Pack and Save, Countdown, whoever. I think if you're doing something truly innovative, that's not just the Me Too, we're actually pushing science and coming to market with something fresh and new. I'd imagine you'd be hard pushed to get a product to market and hit that kind of scale, which you kind of need to be able to stay viable, under $2 million would be my estimate. I think probably closer to 3 million if you're really going to be ambitious. But if you have 2 million behind you, you can take a different approach, which is that organic, slow build out. It may take you 5 years to get to that point, and that's totally fine as well. Because some people, that's the journey they're on, or they don't have the funds, or maybe they just want to enjoy the ride a bit more than hitting big targets from day one. But if you are trying to, hit the mainstream pretty quick, I think 2 mil would be my minimum that I'd want to go into that with.
Yeah, that sounds about right. With a couple of other brands and things, people I know, a lot of people will say, a lot of my other larger clients will say you need deep pockets. You do need, and continually deep pockets as well, because not just getting into, like you say, getting there is one thing, but staying there is another. And one at Rona McKenzie, who's on Red Shoots, and she said to me, like, getting to the launch and launching into retail is just the beginning, and then staying there becomes a challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of like, getting to shelf is like just turn up the start line in a marathon. Like you've done your training and you got there because of your training, but don't think the launch is now the finish line. It's just the start line. And that's cool. You just got to put it in perspective. But those ongoing costs, whether it's getting shelf life trials done, or whether it's your compliance costs, testing, your food safety costs, that stuff just keeps adding up every day, every week. It doesn't go away. That's when those deep pockets, or at least access to deep pockets if you don't have it right now. But, and constantly fundraising, you've got to be constantly looking at ways to build that runway and that cash flow because, things can come along, and we had COVID disrupt us and it really threw us out. I think definitely always, you're always pitching, you're always fundraising, whether you need it or not, because those conversations generally take twice as long as you'd expect. Yeah,
cool. Oh, look, thank you so much for imparting all of that wonderful wisdom this morning, Jade. I really appreciate it, and good luck for the US and that marathon starting over there. It'd be great to hear how you've gone in maybe 13 or so weeks, but let's keep in touch, and thank you so much for joining us.
And thanks for having the channel, Laura. It's great to share the knowledge, and I look forward to tuning into the other shows.
Awesome.